Live.
Okay, you should be live.
All right, I just typed that in. Okay, the live stream is live and stream. Okay, hi everybody. So we're just gonna give this a minute for some people to actually get on the stream, and so I'm gonna burble for a minute, and then I will properly introduce what is this about, what is this book, who are these people, why are you here, why am I here, is there a god? I won't answer that one, and we'll take it from there. I'm just gonna take a quick peek at our total. How are we doing? We've got $3,617. 147 backers, and a full 30 days left in the campaign. I'm feeling pretty okay as the publisher. I will be honest about that. I didn't know what to expect. I'll get into that later. I felt, good about the project. I wouldn't be launching it if I thought it was bad. When you know every little detail under the hood, it's very easy to tell yourself a story about how they're all going to laugh at you. So I'm very happy that we're at something like 63, 64% funded, and it's not yet. It's been about 11 hours since we launched. That's pretty okay for something that isn't, a Brandon Sanderson book or the latest iteration of a very, very popular role-playing game or something. I'm feeling pretty okay about how we're doing. And in fact, for those of you who have joined us and know who I am and know a bit about what this is all about, we're actually, by percentages, a little ahead of our crowdfund from earlier this year for the magazine, which itself blew the doors off. So I'm feeling okay. I'm feeling okay. I'm just wary of tempting fate to strike me down. So I'm gonna have a sip of soda for strength, and then yeah, we'll continue a little bit more. Also, I just realized I should click join the chat so I can actually see who's in the chat. That might be smart. All right. So let me have a look again back at the main thing. Okay, we're good. We're good. All right. So this is being recorded. Maybe you're joining us later, so I will just, I guess, launch into it now for past, present, and future people. Well, just present and future. Linear time is tricky. Tonight, we have... Oh, hey, first comment. Hello, Stakes of Purgatory. Hello. The stakes are high. We have the social media coordinator, new to the team as of a little while ago. Hello, Remedy C. Hello. Lee Wright. Hello, Lee. Thank you so much for joining us. Lee is the new Kevin Beckett. If you know what that means you are an old New Age Sword and Sorcery head, and thank you so much for returning this once again. If what I just said makes no sense to you, don't worry, there won't be a quiz. So Lee is making sure that the tubes are connecting to the screens and the whatnot, and is also doing a wonderful job of helping keep people informed about what's going on via our social media channels. Hello, DL Reach. All right, good to see you, man. Yeah, so thank you, Lee. Meanwhile, we also have with us tonight Jay Wolf, who is the editor of our anthology, Beating Hearts and Battle Axes. Might be a relevant person to this project. We'll talk more with Jay soon. And for funsies, why not? Why wouldn't we do this? What's your problem with her? We have Valerie. We have Valerie Valdes, who is an author in our table of contents for this anthology. So again, potentially relevant. We'll talk to we'll talk to Valerie a little bit later. And as you can see, she's the only one with a sword. So, who's really in charge of this live stream? Not me. Oh, hello, Ashigaru. Good to see you, man. And Kevin. Hey, there you go. Kevin Beckett's in the chat. It's King Cabernet. So there you go. If you ever wonder what a Kevin Beckett looks like in a small avatar format, you can see him. Okay. What else are we going to do here? Okay, so maybe though you're someone new. Maybe you are like a follower of like SL Wong or any of our other authors who are we reached outside the Sword Sorcery Choir to bring in, and this is all very new to you. I'm going to give you the super tiny edition of where this all came from, and then I'm going to toss over to Jay to talk a bit more about the anthology and why it's like a pretty exciting thing for us. So yes, as I mentioned, my name is Oliver, and I'm the publisher of Brackenbury Books. I thought very hard about that name, and Brackenbury Books is it's just a name that I put on a magazine that we had 2 years ago, almost to the day. I turned to a buddy named Nathan who can't join us tonight, unfortunately, and I said, "Hey, man, Nathaniel, do you want to do a magazine?" And he was like, "Sure." And now 2 years later, here we are. The magazine is called New Age Sword and Sorcery. It has 3 issues out and 2 more that were crowdfunded quite nicely earlier this year that will come out later, issues 3 and 4. And now here we are, expanding into books with the anthology. So the anthology, Beating Hearts and Beating Hearts and Battle Axes is our very first book, and I'm very excited to say I think we're gonna make it. I think we're gonna hit 100. It's gonna happen. So that's really, really cool. And do we have more books planned? Of course we do. Publishing moves at a glacial pace, and you have nothing but time to daydream. So, I've got notions for what we're publishing through to this time next year. But one thing at a time. Yeah, New Age Sword and Sorcery was basically born out of a desire to, kind of help contribute to what is like a third wave of popularity of this specific fantasy subgenre, which I could easily blow an hour talking about like what makes it specific. Why is it different from epic or high fantasy? But I'm going to leave that out for now. Trust me, though, there's a lot of blather about that in issue 0 of the magazine, which is available for free for download from newedgeswordandsorcery.com. So that's cool. Meanwhile, uh, I'll just say this. The ethos of that magazine is in kind of in our slogan, which is made with love for the classics and an inclusive boundary pushing approach to storytelling. So we're very big about like we want to teach you the cool history and bring out all these neat notes of what worked in the past of this genre and really respect that history because I think that's so important for when you're working in the genre to really understand where it came from. But also, kind of bring it into the future, kind of, leave behind maybe some of the old attitudes because I mean it was born in the 1930s. Like you're gonna find some gross stuff. I mean you're gonna find some gross stuff from some people now and 4 or 5 minutes ago, but you get the idea. And also, as you can tell from the other half of that slogan, try and like broaden the circle, bring more people in. It's getting better, but right now the fan base and authorship and publishing ship of Sword and Sorcery is mostly people who look like me. I can't do anything about my own appearance, but what I can do is bring in other people who aren't me. And I think we've done an okay job of that so far. We're going to keep working to keep doing a better job as we go forward. Plus, boundary pushing storytelling. We're going to try new things. So, or at least things that haven't done a lot before. And that brings us to this anthology, Beating Hearts and Battle Axes, where, you know, sometimes in stories, people kiss. I know, it's true. And in Sword and Sorcery, it's been kind of funny because in its long history, there are exceptions. I mean, I'm talking about almost 100 years of publishing here. But in general, Sword and Sorcery's been a kind of funny duck because it will have, lots of people who are like wearing nothing but loincloths charging around. And especially with like the way the art turned in the 60s with Frank Frazetta, who's a fun name to look up if you don't know him. Boy, everybody was just getting covered in baby oil and flexing their muscles and showing their butt cheeks. Men and women, which was always nice about Frank Frazetta. Everybody's butts are out with him. Uh, sorry, I'm remembering dumb jokes, so I'll leave out for now. So you have all that kind of literally naked sexuality in a lot of ways, and there's almost always a love interest in these stories because that's just storytelling in general in the West. Um, but in most Sword and Sorcery stories, things tend to be kind of chaste with how relationships are portrayed. Usually, the love interest is just kind of a goal or a reward. They're not fully fleshed out people, or even if they are, like if there's any like love scenes, it's kind of like a darling smooch, and then fade to black, and we cut to somebody getting their leg chopped off. And I'm all here for the action. Like we're not removing the action. Oh no no. But I just have felt for quite some time now what if we had a little more of the smooching? What if we had a little more depth of the relationship? What if like the partner or partners in the relationship got to be treated a little more equally? You get the idea, right? And then I'm seeing, oh, hey, everybody's talking about romantasy in these last couple of years. What if we just went phew and fused them together? What if romantasy and sword and sorcery had a little smooch and their baby was this book? I'm not going to explore that metaphor too deeply. This is our attempt at seeing what we can do by infusing sword and sorcery with a bit more spice and a bit more romance, and make the stories a little longer. In the magazine, we tend to publish 6,000 word stories, but in this one, each one is 12,000 words because you need a little time for a relationship to develop and have room for some kind of plot involving evil, weird sorcery and whatever, right? Um, so it's going to be 6 stories, 12,000 words a piece, give or take a few syllables. And we have all the manuscripts in. They're all at various stages of developmental editing, so that's nice. I mean, in essence, the book is written. We're just still processing what has been written. And part of what this crowdfunding goes towards actually will be paying a proofreader, so we make sure it's not the the best of times, the blurst of times, the Ellen Burstyn of times. So yeah, that's the absolute gist. At this point, I should probably close my lips for a few minutes. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw us over to Jay Wolf, the editor, and Jay maybe can tell you a little bit of their sort of side of how this project was born and why they were excited to be a part of it. Jay.
Hey, so yeah, so Oliver approached me about possibly doing a special issue of New Edge Sword and Sorcery back all the way in April 2023. As we've been talking about, publishing moves very slowly. As the conversation went on, we realized it would probably function better as an anthology, simply because, first of all, a book is a discrete object, where a magazine is a thing that has a continuity, has a front and an end, and you kind of have like you have issues that keep going on, and fitting special issues into that, in addition to doing, especially since the runs for New Edge Sword and Sorcery are about 2 a year, it didn't really make a lot of sense to do that. So an anthology sounded like it made a lot more sense. Um, and I do have some experience with that, and I have a lot of experience with editing short stories, so it was sort of a natural fit there. And Yeah, so then we basically kicked it around back and forth for several months, and found a few different people we thought might be interested in doing this, and built sort of a backbench of people to take on this project. And it wasn't really until the crowdfund earlier this year that we were able to greenlight the whole thing, and suddenly suddenly we had the toboggan downhill, going like, now we have to actually do
Yeah.
work.
Yeah, now we'll actually have the funds to pay for the cover
Yeah.
and other silly little things like that that you don't need. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. The process, of course, like being that it is sort of the first book coming from Brackenberry Books, we were able to do a lot of like back and forth about what shape this thing should be, how many stories should we aim for, like what length should we do. And I mean, ultimately, as Oliver was explaining, like we ultimately decided we wanted fewer stories with a little bit more length, so that we could get a lot deeper relationship stuff and fighty stuff without having a whole lot of confrontation there. The good news is literally every single one of my authors has come in right at or slightly above that 12,000 words. So you're getting 6 jam-packed stories for this.
And if I can pipe in with my my car salesman voice for a moment, if we hit 200 backers, and we're currently at 147, I think still, something like that.
That was the last I saw.
Yeah, if we hit 200 backers, which feels doable, there will be a digital sort of like extra side dish, as it were, bonus story written by myself called Pagan Poetry. It's about 6,000 words, and it's in the vein of this anthology. I'll just say that. I'm pretty happy with it, and I hope you guys will get to enjoy it, because that means we hit at least 200 backers. So hey. So there'll be that as well, and there may even be another bonus story, but we'll keep that under wraps for now. Yeah. um, so okay, Jay, you told us a little bit about the birth of this project.
Yes.
How about we hop over and let Valerie say something for a minute? God forbid. Valerie.
Yes,
Hello.
Oliver. I'm trying to snatch the bug from the air and it's not working.
I have faith in you. Well, get the sword. Actually, before we go any further, where is this sword from? Can you tell us anything about the sword?
Oh, the sword is from Purple Heart Armory, and it is a long sword. It is fight ready. It is not tournament. I would not use it in a tournament, but it's definitely good for practice, and you can hit other swords with it. And I used to do HEMA, or as a friend of ours said, historical European martial arts, and stopped that with COVID. Never really picked it up again, unfortunately, but I do still have my sword, and so here we are, swording around.
Awesome. So, I mean, there you go. I mean, that's really the first and main qualification for doing this. So, fighting your sword.
Ability to swing a sword. You got it.
Yeah, but you also, I think, have written a few sentences before this story. This is hardly going to be your first publication.
Yeah,
so.
a couple things, yes.
What would you say you've written in the past that you could tell us a little bit about that feels most germane to what you've written for this anthology?
So I'm leaning, I think, most heavily on. I wrote for Magic: The Gathering the story for the Lost Caverns of Ixalan set, and that was one in which it was a multi POV situation. You had various groups that were essentially doing a journey to the center of the Earth story. Started in the jungle for one of the groups, at least. And it was that kind of just adventure, fighting, puzzle solving, dungeon delving kind of story with a bit of horror mixed into it. And so that's probably the closest thing I would say to what I've got for this anthology, which is very much a sort of jungle journey to a cursed city sort of thing.
Okay, and if you can tell us without, I don't know, too many spoilers, where would you say, the ideas for spark for your story for this? Like, were you looking out the window and the cat did something that seemed germane, or what?
Absolutely not. No, this is something that I had it actually in my story file from a long, long time ago that I was potentially going to be writing a whole novel about this, and I don't think the story actually has a whole novel in it ultimately, and so it seemed like a good idea for this particular anthology. But the stuff that I have been kicking around, so I've been playing a lot of Horizon Forbidden West, which has a somewhat salty protagonist lady who is absolutely a badass and very much kind of a wants to be on her own sort of character. And so that appealed to me definitely. But also looking at stuff like Aguirre, the Wrath of God, which is the back in the day Klaus Kinski, and we lost Oliver, it looks like. Oh, he's coming back. There you go. I don't know. It's just something weird on my screen. But Aguirre, the Wrath of God, which is kind of the ultimate, like, what if the Spaniards got their just desserts as they attempted to pillage and do all the bad things the Spaniards did when they came to the New World. And there was another thing that I had said was an inspiration for this, and I have already forgotten what it is. Oh, it was
Horizon.
it was it was the Mountains of Madness. I was like,
yes,
a little horror for you as
Yeah,
well.
awesome.
Why not? Why not add some cosmic horror to the mix?
I mean, it's incredibly in the DNA of sword and sorcery, I always find it funny when people say, well, I'm going to do a sword and sorcery story, but I'm going to put some horror in it. It's like, yeah, even in some of the much lighter stories, I mean, Seven Secrets, lighter, Path and Great Master stories where you're kind of laughing with the boys one minute and the next minute something terrible has occurred.
Yeah, I think that's part of the sorcery aspect is that the sorcery is sort of meant to be unfathomable and ineffable in a way. It's sort of cosmic horror-y, honestly, and not all sword and sorcery is like that, but I think that a lot of it, if it's not the sort of wonderful thing, it's the horrifying thing. So
Yeah, and I think that's part of what I always love about sword and sorcery, right? It's like you just get. I feel like when it's done right, you get all these like beautiful tensions between. Often I talk about the tension between the fact that you tend to have, capable but very human, more relatable protagonists, and then the fantastic elements tend to be more like unique and numinous, supernatural and strange, like unquantifiable, cosmic, maybe. And so the further you kind of pull those apart, the more interesting the place in the middle where they meet. And Shoot, I just noticed the logo changed to the new one for the anthology. I'm very happy, but that blew it right out of my brain what I was saying. Shoot, no,
squirrel.
I was squirrel. Yeah, I was building to a point. Well, anyway, the point, yeah, whatever. The note of it is that it's good that you have that in your story because that is extremely germane to sword and sorcery, and to me, it's like a core ingredient. Maybe not every story has to go hard on that element, but even I think in the stories where the numinous is the least present, it's still nice when it's kind of like, was that magic? I don't know. Was that what? How was it? Yeah, it's not like, well, I checked the textbook of our basically a technology that we call magic for some reason. Like it's yeah. Not to poo-poo what people like, but I know what I like, and I like sword and sorcery, so maybe I should publish it. Huh. Okay, well that's real cool. And if I remember correctly, like you're pretty deep in your manuscript, and luckily you and Jay know each other from before these, and so there's been a lot of back and forth.
Oh yeah.
I mean, feel free to both be unmuted for this. Want to chat about like what has it been like working on the story together? You don't have to spoil like actual content, but just like what has that editorial process been like, given your old pals?
Well, basically, it was me taking my story idea to Jay and being like, "This," and Jay being like, "Yeah," and then me periodically lobbing scenes at Jay to be like, "Clap," and Jay being like, "Yes." So that's more or less the process.
More or less. I mean, like, I feel like it's a little more in depth than that, but it's pretty much that. Like that. That is very much our process, and we sort of have that. We have that same brain problem sometimes. It's funny because we're very different people. Like at our core, we're very different. But in terms of like, we do have a bit of like a cohabituated writing style, wherein and like honestly, my process is very similar, except that I'm usually posting things at 2 a.m, and they're getting retrieved in the morning, and then I come back and deal with them. But yeah, that's we both have the same process. It's just sort of in reverse.
Yes.
Well, okay,
Please
so
clap.
well, how about we shuffle over a little bit to talking more about the editorial process, right? Because I think it's fair to say, from conception, the challenge with this anthology is the fact that we're kind of being like, okay, well, here's sword and sorcery. We have a pretty good grasp on what we want that to be. Okay, cool. And then over here we have, well, we're not talking about hard R romance, Harlequin, kiss on page 3, happily ever after, guaranteed. So, and then romantasy is like a fun term for something that's really not that new in fantasy. And of course, you've all seen some particularly bad takes. The Guardian had one where it's like, "Can you believe ladies are writing and reading fantasy?" Like, so we don't need to explain why that's dumb. But romantasy is kind of it's like a hot word from the last few years, describing essentially what, right? Like, I mean, and Jay, I knew you understand that much better than I did. You've done a good job of helping me better understand it. But when I first was like, what if, more kissing? It basically just came out of me having really enjoyed the Conan story, People of the Black Circle, and really wanting those two characters at the end, Conan and the Princess Devi Yasmina, to basically make a choice that would break the story, right? Classic fan thing. Like, this is why authors really should listen a little bit to fans, but not too much, because I know in my heart, like, I read the story, and spoiler for an almost 90-year-old story already that's in public domain, sorry. But People of the Black Circle essentially has, Conan and this princess, they meet, they're not equals, a whole bunch of stuff happens, they get to know each other, they get to actually like see each other. And then we fall into a classic theme of like personal desire for each other versus their obligation to like their respective peoples, right? Conan's got this war band he's leading, and of course the princess has her nation. And by the end of the story, they both get to basically play general and fight alongside each other at the general level, like commander general, drive off the enemy, hear the lamentations of their soldiers, whatever. And then they look at each other and are like, so, we gonna have a relationship? And then like, well, I got these responsibilities. Well, I got these responsibilities. Well, you can come with me. I don't want to live with like a barbarian. You can come with me. Well, I don't want to be, in your male harem because your culture says I can't be, king or co-ruler or whatever with you. Huh. All right. Well, I guess we'll just part on mutual respect. Bye. And like, that's a terrible summary, but it's the basic idea. And it's the best way to end that story. Like, I'm never going to tell Robert E. Howard how to fix that story. I think his best, in my opinion. And he wrote some bangers, as you might well know. But the fan in me wants them to just be like, oh, let's run off together, and we get to see them in one of those scenarios that they dismiss. And I'm not even on my own, right? Because for those of you who know your SNS lore, and those of you who don't, feel free to enjoy learning some names of some people you can have fun looking up. In the 60s, there was a guy named Lynn Carter who worked with another fellow called Friday Camp to revive Conan, and they're a big part of why we know who Conan even is today. They're a big part of why the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie happened. And along the way of them republishing the Conan stories, and there's a whole lot of stuff I can get into, I'll leave out for now, they commissioned a new original story where halfway through, Devi Yasmin just like shows up, and her and Conan have a night together, and it's like, oh, they finally get to, sleep together. Like, literally just the fanboys got to do the thing like 30 odd years later after publication. And so, was it a good story? But it scratched that itch, right? And so I just thought, well, okay, well, what if you could like bake it in from the start and make it a good story and the relationship makes sense for the story, yada yada yada, right? And not have this like well-meaning fan sabotage that like even I myself feel that urge. Like, I'm not crapping on the guys who did it. I might have done it if I was them. So Jay, after all that preamble, we have, like I said, we have this dance between like what even is romantasy. We don't want to go into hard arbor Harlequin, but it's something like in this neighborhood, whatever that is. And then we got sword and sorcery. How are we going to blend this without losing what makes either one special? How do we play to the strengths? What fits together well? What doesn't? Da, 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 da. How have you? What could you tell us about your feelings and approach to this fusion that we're trying in the anthology?
Right. So, I mean, of course, and this is one of those things that I try to bring up everywhere I go because I feel like it's materially resonant. So my first encounter with sword and sorcery is the ElfQuest comics. And ElfQuest is a heavily romantic comic, but it also deals very, very much in barbarians with swords. So like there's both of those elements there. And so to me, like having both of those things be interacting naturally is like not weird to me. And so, and I mean, like that's the comic started in 1978, so it's not new. it's it's 46 years old.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
that would
so
have been the height of the second wave of sword and sorcery. So very
exactly,
much it was
exactly.
in
It
the
was
air.
right. It was in the zeitgeist at the time for sure. And so one of the things about that is like sort of like that's where my sensibilities in sword and sorcery come from. And so like to me like a lot of like of course we've talked about this before, but I like to say that we're sort of coming at it from both of the opposing poles of sword and sorcery. I love Elric and those kind of things. The stories there are very like romantic and tragic, and there's a lot of character in them in a way that's, which the reason that they're all in sword and sorcery is that these things are all very similar. But anyways, so yeah, so for me, the romance element is actually like a very natural part of building a sword and sorcery story. And that was I think that was sort of the genesis of you asking me to do this, was like, oh, you have a demonstrated ability to do that in a sample that I sent him for a totally different thing. And that was sort of where the conversation spawned from. um but yeah, so like a thing that I do think is interesting is sort of like the waves of acceptability that romance as an element of fantasy goes through. And that's sort of like where we're at in the like romantasy zeitgeist. Is the same thing with like romantic fantasy of the 90s, for example, which is another thing that I grew up on. I absolutely devoured literally anything I could get my hands on, from Mercedes Lackey, um Evangeline Walton, like just a lot of mostly female authors that are yay, Elf Coast Love. Oh, I have to bring it up everywhere because there's always somebody. But really, it was influential for me. I landed on it at a very early age, definitely like an early enough age that the like sexy bits of it were just like completely unappealing to me. Like there was no curiosity. I was just like, oh, this is one of the naked pages. And so I would be like, yeah, no, I want the sword pages, please. And sometimes those are interspersed very close together. So um yeah, like that again, like that whole the types of relationships that these characters were building, again, like to me it seems natural that those things would be in sword and sorcery. So a specific project that approaches it like, well, why don't we set out to do that, is pretty much where I came at this. And where I think we sort of landed on when we were designing, like, what do we mean by romance and sword and sorcery? What do we mean by by combining these things? Because there were different directions we could have taken it for sure. But
And
yeah, sorry.
no, I was gonna say, and I completely agree with you on all this stuff. Obviously, we discussed it before,
Oh yeah.
about it
And
seeming
we
a
have
logical
discussed different
fit
things
and
too.
about there having been past works where it was woven in. Yet strangely, if you look particularly at the second wave, I find,
Right. Oh, I think
I
there's
think
a
'cause I think the first wave of SNS, the Pulps, I was chatting with Molly Tanzer about this. Molly Tanzer, being someone I worked
yeah, yeah,
with
yeah.
in the series magazine, for the listeners. Um, on the new Charlotte Reed story, so keep an eye out for that. But yeah, I was talking to Molly, and she was kind of like, if you look back at the pulp SNS stories, the 30s and 40s, they're a lot saucier than you might think. Or there's stories that are a lot saucier than the say the Conan ones that get most of the attention. But then you look at the second wave of sword and sorcery, and again, there's always exceptions.
Right.
Tanith Lee, of course, coming in late
Yes.
70s, early 80s, big exception there. But by and large, oddly chaste. Like I said earlier, like a lot of cutting away, fades to black, and or if it isn't doing the very chaste, they kiss once and we fade to black, or we move
Right.
away to a new scene. Then it goes hard to the other way, and you get the breasted boobily down the stairs, or you get essentially the maturity level of, hey, do you know what a hot
Yeah.
Carl is?
Yeah.
Like it's just
Yeah, there's two tiers, and neither of them are exceptional.
there's
One
just
of the
extreme
things I
ends of
will
a
point out
spectrum.
there
Yeah.
One of the things I will point out there is, at least I know at least one of the major publishers had a pretty rigid rule about certain types of sexuality, which is very funny because that same publisher is also the publisher of Gore. So
Oh, and Gore was back in the day, at least. That was a Daw book, wasn't it?
yes. Yeah,
Yes.
so I
Okay.
know from letters that I've read that like Donald Walheim would definitely cut sex scenes. So
Interesting. Well, there you
yeah.
go. Publishers can have a lot of
And
influence.
honestly, like, for what it's worth, like, the Gore books are so poorly written that they just use the word rape to mean sex. So like
Yeah, well, I
they're
mean,
not actually very sexy because it's just like the wording is so weird. And
yeah. For those who don't know what the hell we're talking
yeah,
about, if you
sorry,
ever want to just
I went down a
no,
really
no, it's all
terrible rabbit
good.
hole.
But I want to try and bring everybody in here. For anybody who doesn't know what we're talking about, if you want to look at like just I'm sorry, the author's still alive, but he's in his 90s, and you know, it's
Good word.
I don't think he's aware of us in any way, shape, or form, nor will he ever
I don't
be.
honestly, I don't care. Let him come for me.
Yeah, yeah. The Gore
I will
books,
destroy him.
GOR, no E, just GOR, are an incredibly long-lived, strangely, many volumes series that began, I want to say, in the mid 70s, and they're known for being essentially, yeah, very sexual and unusual in that way for SNS of the era. But yeah,
And
very
I
not great.
almost wonder if
I'll just say that.
if the like some of the like chastity of the genre, and this is one of those things where I haven't done any research on this specific topic, so I don't actually know. But
I'm sure.
I would kind of bank on it being that like that there was some element of the sort of like almost like reactionary chastity.
Hmm,
It's like
maybe.
this isn't one of those sword and sorcery stories, my friend.
Yeah,
Um
maybe. But so I'll say this and then I'll throw the ball back over.
yeah.
So part of the reason I want to highlight that chasteness, that odd chasteness, with like a sprinkling of very immature, not very enjoyable sexuality for most people, I don't think, um, is that having seen that mostly in my research, going back and reading as much as I could of classic SNS, I felt like so, there's a void. I'm trying to avoid unintentionally sexual language and maybe failing. I felt like there was a void that could be filled, and I felt there was a butt that could be plugged. Anyway, whatever. With by doing more, more
It's actually
intentionally
worse.
spicy and romantic fiction in the sword and sorcery sphere. So that brings us back to this. So yeah, but then the nice thing was, Jay, that you were familiar with some of the exceptions. Like Elric, I wouldn't say ever gets terribly sexual, but it definitely is very romantic, and especially in the like
Suggestive
the
is the word I would use.
suggestive, but then like romantic in the sense also of like not just that there's romantic relationships at various
Right.
points, doomed all because it's Elric, but also he feels romantic in the like literary sense of like the
Right.
17,
Right.
1800s, right?
Right.
Big
Romantic
emotions.
tragic, yes.
Yeah, all that good stuff. So okay, so for people who aren't me, for people who are watching, listening, etc., um, how would you define the approach you took to define it to this? What is romance or romantasy or you were very particular, and I don't blame you. When I was
Yeah.
writing ad copy for this, I'd be like, "What if romance?" You're like, "No, no, no." Then the
Yeah, no.
the Harlequin
Yeah.
Harlequin will
As
come
soon
for
as we
us.
have to capitalize that, we're in trouble. Yeah. So I
Yeah.
mean,
So
romance as a genre has a lot of rules, and everyone always complains about the rules. The rules are there for a reason. Readers who want that want a very specific thing in the same way that we want a very specific thing. So honestly, it's very fair.
yeah, no, it's all good.
Ultimately though, so my approach to it, and I usually use the term romantic fantasy just because you can stick all kind of things in front of romantic fantasy. It's sword and sorcery romantic fantasy, or it's like that kind of thing. Like romantic is a very good word for the type of thing that we're doing without giving it too much shape from the like category romance.
Mm,
And I also don't necessarily prefer to use romantasy for what we're doing because romantasy does actually sort of have its own shapes as well.
mm,
And those shapes are still forming. So I don't actually know if we fit them or not. They're like, this is one of those genres that is shaping like as we speak, and new books are coming into that space all the time. I think we're in conversation with them, so I'm not opposed to having the word appear in conversation, but it's not what I would necessarily bill us as because we're doing something that's a little bit of everything in the sense that we're
mm,
pulling in classic tropes from sword and sorcery, we're pulling in modern thoughts about sword and sorcery, we're pulling in classic thoughts about romanticism in sword and sorcery, we're pulling in modern thoughts about romanticism in sword and sorcery. So those things are kind of all meshing together. So one of the objectives that I had sort of in especially in the authors that I was like actively like shaping a story with them is sort of like making sure that both our like our romantic plot is strong enough to hold water and that it's
yes.
believable, but it doesn't have to conform to the like oh, well, they have to meet and hate each other, and then they have to like each other, and then they have to unlike each other, and then at the end somehow they like each other again. Like, I didn't want to do that as much as leave space for there to be different shapes of relationships. And to their credit, all of my authors have brought me very different shapes, which I'm like so freaking geeked about.
Yeah,
There
it's really
are
nice. Sorry, go ahead.
it's genuinely satisfying to be like, I I guarantee that there are stories in this thing that you are going to love. And I really like that independently of my instruction, I ended up with like 4 out of 6 of them are either some stripe of queer or non-traditional relationship. And which is kind of incredible because I didn't set any kind of quota for that. It just sort of happened that way.
Yeah.
I
Nor
realized
would you
that
really want to, because yeah, you're kind of forced.
yeah, I mean, oh yeah, no, I mean, I could easily have stacked it at completely in that regard, but it was one of those things where it just was sort of emergent, which I thought was interesting because I think it says a lot about the types of stories that emerge in classic sword and sorcery and how some of those stories are really unfulfilled. We've been having a wonderful and lively conversation in the chat in the on the community tab here on BackerKit
Yes.
all day about how those tropes and those characters can really align in like ways that the reader wants more. And so like it was one of those things where when Oliver approached me, I was like, well, maybe. And I was like, well, yeah, because this is like this is where I live.
You reminded me of
So
pardon me, pause for 2 seconds, 'cause you reminded me of
yeah.
2 interesting things, and one of which I'll bounce it back to you on. One is, if you're watching this and you're like, "Community tab, what are they talking about?" If you go to the campaign page and you look along the top of, like, the text below the video, you'll see there's like pledges, add-ons, and a community tab. And you can go there, and it's a place where you can chat with other people who are, checking out the campaign. You don't have to have backed us to comment. And we really want to try and have like lively conversation on there. So yes, that's where Jay is referring to. And by all means, please go there and tell us what tropes you enjoy in sword and sorcery and romantic or fantasy, whatever you want to call it,
Yes.
and what you'd like to see more of, what you'd like to see done differently, because we really want to hear your thoughts on that. We also had someone else start a different conversation about basically what sword and sorcery stories have you read where you wish, what if you could go back in time and just like a big syringe marked romance, what would what old story would you go back and inject it into? Which I thought was pretty fun too. So we got some good conversations there, which we're having a good time. So you can join in that. It's not too late. And then the other thing I was going to say that Jay just reminded me of, and Jay, then I'll give this back to you,
No worries.
was I think part of what gave us the variety that you're talking about is the fact that early on, I took this very like babyish, simplistic approach, but I think it's still a good one. Where I was like, well, if we've got sword and sorcery over here, we got romancy stuff over here, and they're going to kiss or something, and we got like 2 aisles, like a wedding. So we'll have 3 authors from the sword and sorcery aisle, and we'll have 3 authors from the kissy fantasy, the rest of it's aisle. Now, I think I may put it slightly less stupidly, but I'm having fun presenting myself as a cartoon character. And so that was kind of the approach. And to further like underline that, I sort of took the SNS aisle because it's very simple for me to think of authors. 2 of our authors, David C. Smith and Bryn Hammond, both have been published in the magazine. So that was, already defined relationships. I knew what it was like to work with them. I thought you'd have a good time working with them as an editor, and that they could bring it for
Absolutely.
this kind of thing.
No question.
And then the third author I chose, T.A. Marketon. I knew from like sort of adjacent circles, like the Whetstone Magazine Discord, and I had read a story by her in the Rogues in the House podcasts anthology, Book of Blades, Volume 2. Gosh, something with wolves in the title. I'm very tired because of my puppy, sorry. But it was a good story. We did a conversation panel on it that's on our YouTube channel. You guys can check it out if you want to hear that. Point is, I was like, okay, people I basically know of, sword and sorcery, yeah. But sword and sorcery who, like, I knew they could bring something a bit more, into it,
Yes.
along the lines of what we're describing. And then Jay, you looked
Yeah, I
at
had the
your
harder
side.
project. I had to
Yeah,
do the
you
double black
definitely had
diamond
the hard
part.
project. Yeah, I just like looked at my Rolodex. I was like, these people. No, I was a bit more thoughtful, but you get.
Oh,
But yes,
and all of my authors had about half the time.
yeah, I know that
That
wasn't
was just
planned.
an
I think.
accident. That was just an accident of calendars. It's fine. It was
Yeah,
just
it was a
funny
good.
because I was like, yeah, and I need a story in like 2 months.
I think it
Yeah.
was, I felt okay approaching my authors before the crowdfund for the magazine made it clear the anthology was going to happen, because I was like, well,
Right.
maybe we can figure something out in the magazine if the anthology doesn't happen. but it didn't make sense to approach your authors until we knew it was happening.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. Oh, no question. And it was, to be fair, like I had been scouting for kind of a long time out of like the pool of people that I knew, like who did I think could handle like the like relative technical demands of sword and sorcery, because there are some.
Oh yeah.
And I really want somebody who's very competent with action scenes, and I want someone who's really competent with the physical elements. And so it was a project. It took some time, and I did want to err on the side of people that I at least knew by reputation were wonderful to work with. And so of course, first I did have to lean over to my dear friend Valerie and briefly remove her from my brain to be like, hey, would you like to do this thing? But to be fair, by the time that I had approached her about that, I had been talking to her for months about it, just as a like, hey, Oliver Brackenbury at New Edge asked me if I might want to do this magazine thing. And yeah, so it wasn't I wasn't approaching her with the same level of like, hey, I have this project.
It wasn't exactly cold call. No.
As I did for Brent and SL Wong. Both of them are absolute champions. I appreciate them so much for being able to be like, yeah, that sounds fun.
Of course, there's the one with Brent where I had just seen him on Blue Sky one morning, asking about sword and sorcery and being like, if I do this, is that sword and sorcery, or is it more like epic? And I was like, well, and I got in there, in a friendly fashion. I didn't do the comic book shop guy thing. Chatted with him for a bit. Then I was like, looked at his website, looked at his bibliography, and was like, I wonder, maybe. And I went to you, and I was like, what if we had Brent in the thing? And you were like, what do you think I am, a Republic serial villain? I signed him on 45 minutes ago, or the night before, but whatever. So that was
which is why he was asking the question, actually.
Yeah, there you go. I had no idea. I was literally talking to a guy that was going to be in the anthology.
He was asking questions about sword and sorcery, like sort of the like sort of some of the boundaries and strictures of like what would qualify as a sword and sorcery story. And it was a wonderful and engaging question. I feel like we got a lot of conversation out of it, which was very cool.
I love how I completely unknowingly was coaching him on what I thought sword and sorcery was, and it was valuable because I'm the publisher.
It was very funny. It was very funny, and I still like it. Yeah, it still gives me a little chuckle every time.
Sorry, but yeah. So Brent and SL Long.
Yes, and so the nice thing with being with approaching people who are comfortable in action, comfortable in romance, and malleable on all the other aspects is that I was able to at least do a little bit of like direction around what sort of stories might be useful and fulfilling, and got to really do like my absolute favorite part of editing, which is developmental editing, where you have like all of these raw materials. They might be a story, they might just be like a concept, they might be 3 concepts in a trench coat. And so sometimes the job is like rearranging them so they're in the right order in the trench coat. Sometimes the project is that you have the thing out on a table and you're just pulling all the wires out and recrossing all the wires and plugging them back in. But it's absolutely my favorite thing to do. Like it's one of those things where like I used to do it for free for a very long time, and now I don't do it for free anymore. So there's still 2 slots available, guys. But yeah.
Sorry, hang on. No, there is a pledge here where you can not only get a paperback, and you can pledge a little more if you want a hardcover instead. Not only get a paperback of the anthology, and of course, free digital formats. We're only doing that for this. If you buy the thing later, you will only get the physical copy. But right now, free digital with any physical edition you get. Anyway, you get that, and you can have a story of, I forget, was it Jay, up to 7,500 words?
Yeah, I put 7,500 in there. I'm honestly not that picky, but I figured I should set a limit.
You should. I have my 100,000 word short story. Can we look at that together?
Yeah.
So 7,500 word short story. If you want it to be,
I will read the first 7,500 words of that until you need to break it off into a short story.
But yeah, point is, there are 2 out of 3 slots left as we talk currently. Because it's of course limited. We don't want to have that be unlimited. Or people can pledge to get their story edited by you, Jay. So all the more reason for us to talk about your editing process and all that kind of stuff.
I'm still like gobsmacked that was gone in like the first one was gone in the first 10 minutes, which was like
literally the first 10 minutes. That was pretty rewarding. Meanwhile, in the chat, I see Corey Parker saying, "I admire that skill very much. I can only do that for nonfiction essays. How anyone does it with fiction baffles me." Yeah, it's it's all very different, right? I mean, that's the thing. I mean, people hear
Oh, yeah.
editing, they hear it's all the same, like, nope.
Yeah, I mean it's tough. In some respects, like I also like bombard myself with fiction all day, every day. Like I read a kind of scary amount, and so like I have I have a working knowledge of just sort of like what works and what doesn't. That's just sort of honed over decades. And then on top of that, I've also been a slush reader for about 10 years at Uncanny Magazine. So I also have a keen sense of just sort of like this isn't working for me. And while I'm not able to deploy that at Uncanny, really, I'm able to take that with stories from people who have approached me to do an edit for them. And sometimes the process of me doing an edit for someone is like not necessarily editing that story to be a better story, but sort of like, here are the components that you need, here are the components that are missing, here's how you can assemble them and make something that is going to work better next time.
Mm,
But for the most part, I would say that I usually get things in that are at least like, if someone's approaching me for a story, they're usually at least like at that point in their process where they know something's missing. They might need a little bit of guidance on what thing is missing. And I'm usually pretty good at finding that. So that's
mm.
one
I
of my
think that's
favorite things.
I think one thing that maybe it sounds obvious, I guess, to people who are already familiar with this, but maybe not so much to those who aren't. One of the fun things about finding an editor is that you kind of want to find the right one for you, right?
Right.
Because we all come to our editing with our own diverse, body of experience and skills and what we've been,
Absolutely.
reading. One of the reasons I felt confident enough to edit a Sword and Sorcery magazine was because I spent the previous 6 years just going all the Sword and Sorcery I can get my hands on because I'm lucky enough to live near a special collections archive where they literally have like original editions of all kinds of Sword and Sorcery going back to the pulps in the 30s. So, and also like collections of essays have been long out of print. They have Fritz Leiber's collection from the 90s, for example. So I had just spent years being obsessive, cramming the genre essentially. And then eventually circumstances conspired. We don't need the origin story of the magazine right now to make a magazine possible. And I thought, yeah, okay, I feel like I could do that between what I'd done there, but also out of my screenwriting training experience, right? I brought that in, which I feel like screenwriting is not a bad place. You often get people who don't write to the medium. I think it's important if you're writing a novel, write a novel. If you're writing a comic, write a comic. Don't write storyboards or the movie you hope gets made out of that comic, right? Alan Moore has entered the chat and is now very mad, because he has thoughts about that I agree with in this one instance, although I don't know if I'd be quite as grumpy. It's like, and so but nonetheless, I think from screenwriting, right? From screenwriting to Sword and Sorcery is a reasonable thing because Sword and Sorcery is all about motion, right? It's very cinematic, not in the sense of it reading like a screenplay, but in the sense of like the rhythms of it.
Right.
And it's been fun kind of bringing that to my work, but knowing that other people bring other things, to their editing, to their stories. And so I always find that interesting. I guess it's like, what's your origin story? What's your role playing game character stat sheet? As an editor, because Valerie, you also do editing, and I know you do copy editing, but I can't remember. Do you do developmental editing?
Well, I'm co-editor of the Hugo finalist Escape Pod magazine, your weekly science fiction podcast.
Yes,
I do a
and
little
I knew that
developmental
in the
editing.
back of my mind. That in the
You're
foreground, which has
juggling a lot of things right now, so no worries.
has been destroyed by a puppy who's healing from surgery and wakes me up 3 times a night every night. So I'm gonna throw that dog under the bus every time I
No, she's not. You can't
but
throw her. She's too
not literally,
cute.
because then she'll have more surgery recovery, and then it's like I'm just making the
Yeah.
problem stretch out.
Yeah, exactly.
But
You're just
metaphorically,
accelerating this.
I'll do it every day of the week because she doesn't know. She's adorable little creature. But yes, Doi, of course. My God, yes. So Valerie, could you maybe share with us a little bit of what's your DNA, as it were, going into your developmental editing?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. So Jay and I actually met on a forum in which we were in a writers group essentially, and we're developmental editing for each other. We're crit partners, and all of us were kind of working together to bolster our skills and learn new things and stuff like that. So I'm also possibly of the three of us. I don't know about your background, Oliver, but I actually studied writing in school in college. I
If you
took
have there's a piece of paper about it.
I have papers about it. I took creative writing in high school. I started a lit mag in high school because I could. I worked on college lit mags, and I am an English major. I did major in it and got a whole paper about it. I studied screenwriting as well, so I have that in my back pocket too. TV writing, screenwriting, every creative writing class essentially that I could take. I slammed that into my schedule. Thank God for AP classes, getting a bunch of my credits out of the way, because then I just graduated on time like everyone else. But so I go all the way back to that. And yeah, and I've been working at Escape Pod since for about 2.5 years. No, two. I don't know what year it is. It's 22 2 years now and
2024
change. I
right
think.
now.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So
Yeah, it's been at least 2
um,
years.
yes, and but before that, it was just working with friends. We all support each other, we all read each other's stories, we all help each other out. So it's a good community that way. And I was also a municipal liaison for National Novel Writing Month for about 17 years, and so that was more developmental editing there, because it was less let me read the story and tell people what to do about it, and more people talking out their plot problems and character problems and things like that, as we were all supporting each other to try to get stuff written very quickly. And so that was kind of like an oral, writing group situation, in which even if we weren't reading stuff, we were still doing that kind of developmental editing work with each other as we went.
Yeah, no, writers groups are, of course, so very key. Yeah, yeah. No, I think everybody should do that at least once, even if I'm going to find out maybe it doesn't work for you, or maybe that one group didn't work for you, which is, I think, usually more what it is. It's kind of like role playing games. Sometimes people try it and they're like, "Oh, that hobby's not for me." I'll say, "Oh, what happened?" And then what they describe is people who sucked, not the activity sucked. And I think writers groups are kind of like that too. If it doesn't work for you the first time or even the second time, like, just keep looking for good people to work with. But yeah, yeah. All right, cool. Well, thank you for sharing that with us. So I can see we're getting close to having been on for an hour, and tonight is kind of the chill, just like, hey, we're launching. Here's the gist of what we're doing. Live stream. I think in the tradition of what we've done in the last 2 years with the magazine, the final Friday of our campaign, which is the second last day of it, that is Friday, July. I want to say 19th. Let me check my calendar just to make sure I don't mislead anybody.
19th, I
Yes,
believe.
Friday. Yeah, Friday, July 19th, probably starting at 7 or 7:30. We'll make noises about it closer to the day. We will have our big, end of the crowdfund basically party. And we are brainstorming activities for it. I certainly think we want to try and have a bit of fun, do readings of like the most abominable, romance or sex scenes kind of thing that we can do without making anybody uncomfortable. Um, and we got some other ideas. I'm not going to give them away right now, but in past end of the crowdfund parties, we've had, so I read from a Choose Your Own Adventure D&D romance book actually last year. So foreshadowing, I didn't realize. And then, this year for the magazine, we had like a big role playing game demo of like Black Ops Kiss, a role playing game rooted in the Jarell Shuri stories, which made sense because, publishing a new Jarell story. So whatever we do in the final, like big finale of the crowdfund party live stream, it'll be germane to what we're publishing. And we'll trickle out clues about it closer to the day. But yeah, folks, if you want to join in on like a big old fun party, that one, that one will probably go longer and have a lot more wild stuff going on. I mean, who knows, right? The last crowdfund we had a live musical guest, so we're gonna see what we can cram in. In the meanwhile, I'm just gonna say to those of you in the chat before I do my kind of wrap up, do you have any questions for myself, for Jay, for Valerie? I see we've got. Oh, someone said Amos Adams. I saw the line. This is in like the ad copy of the campaign, as it were. The line featuring a variety of partners and partnerships. This anthology. Dot dot dot. And then Amos continues to say, "Does this mean like archer, mage, fighter?" Or like male, male, female, female, male, female, etc. Yeah, I mean,
Mine's a fighter
and
and a ranger.
yeah, yeah. Why not both dot gif, so yeah, no, I actually yeah, I sorry, I could feel a whole side prattle, but I'll leave that out for now and just say yes. Yeah, it's a whole wide mixture of individuals, in terms of both, gender, sexuality, but also like what they wield, and so on and so forth. Yeah, no, I think we've got a pretty good mix overall, as Jay was saying earlier. It's really nice. We there was some thought to the authors that we were approaching and like what we figured they'd write, but there was no telling anybody like, hey, can you do us a female gay relationship or something? Like we
Right.
didn't tell anybody because we want people
Right.
to write what they want to
It
write
was it
for the
was
thing.
neat what emerged though, because definitely there were still like some curveballs. It was kind of delightful
Yeah,
actually.
yeah. No, it was
Um,
fun. I think the only one I really felt like I knew was Bryn Hammonds, and that's not
yeah,
because Bryn is, like, predictable. It's because I specifically said to Bryn, "Hey, those characters and how much we love bringing out the relationship in the Sword and Sorcery stories we
yes.
publish for them in the magazine. Well, here are an opportunity," and Bryn was like, "Yes, I wanted to do that," So it wasn't me ordering anything, but that was probably the closest I came to, like, suggesting, "What if we made eggs and bacon?" Um, Oh, hey, Stakes of Purgatory in the chat says, "Did you say that if this first anthology does well, you'd do another one with an open call?" Yeah, so I don't wanna, like, hard commit to anything because 'cause we're on day 1 of the crowdfund for this one, but but I already know what I wanna do for the cover art for a volume 2, so that tells me something. Plainly, yes, if this anthology, does well enough, certainly has to fund, but I would hope it would go beyond 100% like minimum funding. It would go, enough beyond it to go kinda tell me, "Yeah, people want this. Yeah, we should do more." If we hit that nebulous, undefined number, I can't tell you what it is, and just more, if we do that, if it feels right, then absolutely, I would love to do a second volume next year, either with J editing if they want to do it again, or if they don't, some other editor. But yeah, certainly for
We'll
that, I
have
could
to
see it
see.
being certainly for that, I would make it at least 50% open call, probably 100%. But I'm just, I'm a relatively new publisher. I feel good about what I'm doing because it's not my first like collaborative art project, so to speak. Again, I mentioned screenwriting, film, all that stuff. Um, but open subs are a little scary to me. They're a little scary. How that being said,
I've
due
walked you
to a
through it a
last
little
minute,
bit.
yeah, we did. I didn't. I no. With that being said, we did end up in the magazine unintentionally because someone had to drop out. We had to fill their space. We instead of finding one author, we decided to do open subs for 6 flash fiction authors. So we had like a very rushed little mini open subs, and I had 4 very talented readers who wished to remain anonymous because that's just a good way to do it. Um, and that actually felt okay. That made me feel like, oh, maybe I'll put my toes in a little sooner. So I will say this for New Age Sword and Sorcery 2025 issues. I think we'll have at least one open sub slot. I just, we'll see what happens. But yeah, you can tell I'm like, yeah, but I gotta get myself into the water, as it were. And certainly for the anthology, I won't be the editor, so sure, we'll do open subs.
For the record, I love
Uh,
open subs, so
yeah,
that's
Jay
not a
has like a
problem for me.
different attitude to
I've
me
I've
entirely.
I've read literally, I would say probably at this point, yeah, upwards of 3,000 stories in Slush. So like
Yeah, yeah.
you
And I
can't
don't dislike them. I'm
you
just
can't scare
a
me.
scared little baby about open subs. So yeah, so I would say yeah, 50 to
So, yeah.
100% of the next volume, if we get to do a second volume, will be open subs. So something to think about when reading this edition, I suppose. Okay, so what else we got here? We got some thanks followers, some woo. I'm here for that. You can pitch woo, and then you're halfway to one of the stories in this book. We have Awesome Man 350. Hmm. Curious if pairings are going to be different type of roles, like bard male and barbarian female. Oh, I mean, yeah, again, like why not
Yeah.
both out gift? Like, yeah,
Yeah.
like it's just it's everything. It's everything the authors felt like throwing down. It's I can't think of any stories I read where I was like, get that out of here.
Yeah, no, we
Like,
definitely have a pretty wide variety of like some characters that I would say are sort of, I hesitate to call them stock and trade, but like characters that are doing traditional things. And then we have some characters that are definitely a unique take on characters that you know and love in terms of style. I think it's gonna be fun in that regard. Like
yeah, we
I
don't
think
yeah.
um we have some I will say that since Brent has been talking about it on social media, I feel comfortable saying he has old marrieds barbarians, and they're
Yeah.
great. They're
Yeah,
super
yeah.
fun.
Old
So
old old married,
I'm very
and then
excited about that
barbarians, yeah.
story. I feel like that story is going to get a lot of attention. So,
Oh.
yes, I really love it. I remain over the moon that all of these people wanted to work on with me on this weird thing. It's like
Now, not a
it's been
question,
a
but Stakes
delight.
of not a question, but Stakes of Purgatory he says, "Need tall barbarian GF." Well, I can't help you in real life, but actually, it's funny. That nearly spoils my idea for the cover art for Volume 2 next year. So help get this volume really far ahead, and you'll at least get to see a tall barbarian GF probably in the cover of next year's volume. Okay. Last call. Any last questions, comments, massive derailings, questions that are really comments that turn into 20-minute rants about taxes or something? No? Okay. Sounds like we're good. So what I'm going to do to wrap this up, absolutely wrap it up, is say, please, if you're watching this and you're thinking, maybe I'll back the thing, give it a shot. What are you going to lose? And if you have backed us, please share it with your friends, family, arch enemies, friends to lovers, all that good stuff. And enemies to friends to Dick Tracy. Where am I going with this? And yeah. Let me just say, like, I've done my best, I think, as a publisher to make this crowdfund special because, of course, it will be available for sale down the line. But that's why we have a whole bunch of crowdfund exclusives for this. Like I said, only in this will digital be free with physical formats. So right away, that's kind of nice. But also the bonus story by myself, I think we're going to unlock. So I'll say that's in there. Once we hit 200 backers, might be another bonus story. Again, both separate sort of side dishes in digital formats. And what else you got here? What else you got? Oh yeah, of course. Only in the crowdfund, if we unlock it, will there be a shipping discount? We know it's hard out there when you're not in the States and the book is published out of the States. So if we hit our second stretch goal, we'll have $5 off for Canadians and 10 off for everybody in the rest of the world. If we hit our first stretch goal, Trevor Nyanya, who is our artist for the interior illustration, right now we set for one full page black and white kind of like title page for the book that will go on the inside. But if we hit our first stretch goal, boom, that gets magnified. Sextuple art. See what I did there? There'll be an illustration for each of the 6 stories, full page by Trevor. So all the more reason to help us, push up through the stretch goals. It'll enhance the thing. And what else have we got? He said scrolling through his own crowdfund. Guys, I'm so fried. I need to get a good night's rest tonight. Oh, of course, yes, we have our unique bookmarks. Everybody who backs this on the physical level, so we ship it with the book, will get sort of the logo as a bookmark. People who back us in the first 48 hours will get the barbarian couple essentially from our cover, which it was funny actually. In the cover we were kind of going for more like the classic sword and sorcery theme of civilization versus barbarism, but in this case it's civilization probably going to go sleep with barbarism after the fight. So we've got that as our first 48-hour backer bookmark. And then for all people who've backed us in the past, they will get a bookmark with our sort of meet cute thieves from the back cover, both grabbing, 2 thieves, 1 treasure, both grabbing the same treasure at the same time, and then seeing each other's eyes and going, what's this about? So that's, I would say we got all these fun, unique bookmarks. Again, only the crowdfund. They'll never be for sale or whatever later. And yeah, it's also a chance if you want to check out this magazine I've been talking about, New Age Sword and Sorcery. We actually only during crowdfunds will discount back issues of the magazine and make them available as add-ons. So if you want to check it out, it's the most affordable time to do so. And that would include actually those characters I mentioned earlier, Bryn Hammond's characters, Goatskin and Sister Chaos, a couple of sort of fantasy Mongol rogues, I'll just say that for now. They show up in issue 1 and 0 of the magazine. So if you check out the back issues, you can get like more stories to go with the one that you'll have in the anthology. Not too shabby. And finally, gosh, we just have so many exclusives. Oh, it's just such a good book. Such a good crowdfund. Oh, such a good publisher. We have our first backer, which I need to look up who that was. Our first physical backer will, whoever they are, congratulations if you're watching, will receive a annotated paperback using Post-its or written on the pages if they give permission by Jay, providing special insight into the process of producing the book. And then the top backer, what does that mean? Well, the top backer is like a backer special thing where, remember I mentioned the community tab and people chatting about things? Well, the person who's the most active in our like campaign community over the course of the campaign will be like ranked and get to top backer. And so whoever is the chattiest Kathy in our community, basically, they will receive a paperback, annotated, post-it notes, or in the margins with permission by me. So completely, the publisher's take, and then we got the editor's take with prizes. All fun stuff, all crowdfund exclusives. Not going to do it afterward. So fun stuff to look for. I think that's all the news that's fit to print for now. We may have more live streams between now and the final one. We'll see what happens. Follow us on socials or back the campaign and get updates that way to learn about what they will be and who will show up and all that good stuff. Thank you very much for coming by to check this out, whether you're watching it live or you're checking out the recording later. And if you haven't already, why not consider backing the campaign? It could be fun. Could be fun. Might enhance your love life. Who knows? All right. Jay, Valerie, is there anything you guys want to say before we fly off into outer space?
I don't have anything in particular. I'm just still I'm verklempt and gobsmacked and delighted at how many people are so excited about this thing that has been inside my head for so long.
Yeah, it's nice when the idea that came out of you and me just going blah 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 in DMs for a while becomes
Yeah. Yeah, it's very surreal. The reactions that I've seen in social media, especially because we do have so much queer content, the reactions, especially to that, have been very touching and very moving for me. So I'm, uh, yeah, I had a good little cry about it earlier today. I'm good now, but it was a good cry. It was not a bad cry. It's just sort of very
yeah, good
emotional
news.
for me
All
that
good. Well, I mean, this
as
is
a as a queer editor to be bringing queer stories out and stories that will be, I would still say like there's an aspect of queerness in sword and sorcery, and that's one of those things that has drawn me to the genre. And so yeah, it's just very nice, especially in Pride Month when a lot
yeah,
of things are
yeah,
not nice. So
yeah. Here we are. Here we are in Pride Month. Val, is there anything you want to say before we run off?
I just want to say I don't know what a hot Carl is, and I don't want anyone to explain it to me. That's it. Thank you.
All right. Well, I'm going to send Valerie some DMs she won't want to read later. And I think we're off to the races then. Thank you all so much for backing us and helping us get to this place where we're already at like 60 odd percent, the evening of the first day. That's very encouraging. All right. Good night, everybody.